Hey friends, up next on the Ryan Poley podcast, we have Greg Kuzia-Carmel from Camper in Menlo Park, also Canteen. He's out in Nashville hanging out with us at Iggy's, doing a little pop-up. Amazing chef, great story. Worked at some amazing restaurants around the country and the world, including Per Se. Worked with Michael Tusk in San Francisco, and he worked at the prestigious Mugaritz in Spain. We had a really great intellectual conversation about where the restaurant industry is going, how AI is going to take over, and the bright side to everything that's happening in life. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I liked doing it. Thanks.
I think that the restaurant industry has been commoditized to a degree, and it hasn't grown in the place where I think we thrive, which is sort of this like mid-upper tier expense ratio or range. And it's certainly, you know, there's been a lot of development on the low end, and there's still the same characters at the top end. Mm-hmm. But we've all been squeezed out because that middle piece of, you know, the market just doesn't make sense financially, and it's competitive in a non-productive way.
The middle piece.
Yeah,
and I agree.
And we battle with the same things that we just discussed. Like, so why are we going to go to kind of this arena of being an operator, or, you know, making that a career path where you find mostly resistance and very little, you know, enthusiasm for it. And I think the funny thing is, when we were talking about the bear earlier, and everybody's like, "Oh man, well, this is going to be like a really like golden renaissance, you know, for restaurants and hospitality and all these things." And I haven't seen the third season stuff, but from everybody else's feedback that I've gotten, there's very little about the food. There's very little about what happens.
It's more about the story.
It's about the drama.
It's the story and the romanticism about being a chef. And I see when people come into the restaurant, they're, oh, this is like the bear. I'm like sitting like, people are just romanticizing about a broken industry, or, you know, broken people, broken chefs.
Yeah.
And it's not cool, man. I don't know.
I think a lot of people recognize that it's not. There's definitely a lot of like negative competition on both sides of it, and I don't think it was ever intended that way. I don't think I think we do it subconsciously, and it's all amplified because of all the other things that we're kind of constantly in review of, or, you know, technology is a big piece of it. But yeah, it used to be like this beautiful space where people got together and totally detached. And before a lot of the technology, it was where you like saw people and you know, shared in an act of eating and spending time in other people's company. And that, you know, that still happens, but it happens to a lesser degree. Because
why do you think?
I mean, the technology piece of it, we're
hoarders. It's gotta be the fucking technology piece, man.
We are by nature, I think, people who are constantly trying to index information and take things away, and like, we're constantly searching for some kind of, you know, we talked about dopamine hit. That's a big piece of it. But it used to be that we would get that just from being around our friends and our family and some kind of environment, and we would get that from service. We get that from hospitality.
Yeah. The dopamine was the service leading up to it. For me, it was always the anxiety of prepping, looking at the list. I'm not going to make it. And then you get like another project done. You're like, okay, that gives you like a little more of a boost. And then you make it to the finish line. You're like, oh, I finished my prep. Now we got to do the service.
Yeah.
And the service was like, okay, you get into that rhythm, and then it's like the buzz when you go home, and it's like, I got to be up for a couple hours because I'm so charged up. It still happens, but I don't, maybe I'm more jaded now, but it's just kind of like.
Do you find that your kitchen, there's less teamwork and more independence than in previous restaurants you've experienced?
I think the kitchen at Iggy's is a very unique situation, the way that Matthew created the whole tip pool, and the people that he hired.
Yeah.
And I tell them this all the time, that the front of the house staff that he had hired, if it was up to me, I would never hire one of those fucking people just by looking at their resumes, you know. And he has a gift of looking at somebody and just seeing the good in what they could possibly do and visualizing them in a role that they know nothing of. One of our bartenders, Landon, who is one of our best employees, positive energy guy, is a complete sponge, never worked in a restaurant, never bartended. He's the head bartender. Yeah. And I pull him aside and I open him, dude, what the fuck are you doing, man? None of these fucking people worked in a restaurant before. He's like, don't worry, man. We have training. I'm going to train them. Give them adequate. Dude, I got it. You just got to trust me on this. And I'm like, and our deal is he does the front, I do the back. And we only cross over when there's a problem, or he might have an idea of something, not like an idea of a dish, but like something we want to do. And we meet in the middle on a lot of that. But other than that, it's pretty fucking separate. First of all, because I got a lot to deal with in the back and he has a lot to deal with the front. And he has created this environment where he took this random group of people that have never worked in restaurants before, and some people that have, and were so burnt out and jaded that they're like, I'm going to give this one more shot, and if not, I'm going to fucking find an IT job. Yeah. And he created this environment where everybody works together, everyone's in the tip pool, everybody helps everybody out, no job is beneath anybody, and it carried through the kitchen also because they're in the tip pool too. And I only have 3 guys a night. It's a very small team. Yeah. And they're fucking adults. And they've all worked at Michelin-starred restaurants. And they all understand the assignment. And we work as a team, obviously. Yeah, they work as a team. Yeah, I can honestly say that at night during the breakdown, one guy will break off and do the cooler and this and that. And they'll double check everybody's work. Yeah. And they leave the restaurant together. So
I think camaraderie is a really hard thing to develop these days. And I think a lot of kitchens are optimized to silo people a little bit and kind of put you sort of like, this is your zone, this is your area of, kind of monitoring and like yours. And we sort of built this verticalized org chart that doesn't really befit, I think, an environment where most creative people usually flourish. They like some kind of like lateral understanding and some kind of communality and camaraderie. It builds camaraderie. Right. And I think a piece of what's happened to the hospitality and restaurant industry is that we've started to kind of like feed this sort of, kind of matriculation, like this sort of like graduate level sort of like, meritocracy in the form of like everybody, I want to do this and I got to do that. And then I got to do this and I get here. And then you're kind of on your own individual career path and goal set structure. Whereas the places that really, at least I thought had the most success and were the most productive and most creative had a lot more like kind of like communality. Granted, there was certainly like a brigade system or there was like some kind of like, like org chart of responsibilities and stuff.
Yeah, but everybody was there for that particular reason.
Totally.
You go to a 3-star Michelin restaurant, there's nobody there that's like, this is just a job to me. And, I fucking want to do something else and I'm just doing this for the money right now.
Yeah. Or they're not thinking about it from the mindset of I got to do this to get to that, to do that. And then to do this. Like they're not playing like lily pad leapfrog. And a little bit of that's been starched out of restaurants, I think.
When do you think I'm going to stay 3 months and then go cook started coming around?
What do you mean? All like kind of like short tenureships?
Yeah, I mean, nobody stays. Some of these guys, you look at their resume and it's every 3 months. They've worked at every fucking single restaurant in the city, and they've stayed at the place 4 months. And that it seems to be like a theme of like you don't need to stay a year and a half or 2 years at a place anymore. You could stay 6 months and think you've learned everything that you could possibly learn there, or I don't know. But
there was a period of time where I feel like something that maybe consciously or subconsciously happened in restaurants and hospitality is we simplified in so many which ways that, I think there's a degree of people who came into places and, took advantage of that and maybe, they got to their own personal optimization level or kind of understanding their own comprehension in such a short period of time that, it didn't befit them. And the culture of, not spending time and like doing a full tour or full kind of, commitment, full, engagement with a place. I don't know when that started, but I think they kind of go hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Restaurants dumbed down. Dumbed down isn't the word I want to use, but simplified and optimized.
Yeah.
The expected output.
Now, do you think things were simplified because of the workforce that was there with the people around you? Like, okay, I need to simplify this because this is where everybody's education level is.
What was it, a chicken and egg thing, right?
Yeah,
so does the industry hold a little bit of look, 90s and early 2000s, the food that was being done in restaurants was complex, it was challenging, it was labor intensive.
Sauces made a la minute.
Yeah.
10 guys on the line.
It was a really long learning curve to get to proficiency there, but you developed real technique.
Yeah.
And you had to you couldn't master a station in a week of being set upon it. And, that came with its own challenges, right? And its own operational challenges and, cultural and the like as well. But that kind of slow burn created a sentiment of I got to be here. And when I do learn this, I recognize that I'm a craftsman. I'm somebody who's put in my 10,000 hours on this and I want to do it for a little while. And then I can go on to do something else. But 10,000 hours is now 2 60-minute classes and a kind of a
YouTube video.
Yeah, exactly.
And looking at a plating style and think that you understand what's going on in Scandinavia.
And adopting a lot of stylistic stuff that's not rooted or fundamentally underwritten with technique. And that's hard. And a piece of that comes with technology, right? Those things probably are not coincidentally linked up timeline wise, right?
Sous vide steaks.
I mean, look, the Momofuku Empire exploded when we were able to get photos on our phones, right? And then all of a sudden, there's some ubiquity there. And it's easy to go from something that's starting in one place, especially one place that's pretty identifiable. This isn't calling out Momofuku or anyone specific, but then ultimately could be in every other market, tomorrow. Or, there was a period of time where, especially when Instagram was truly instant, where there was a dozen people that we all followed, right? The Wolf's Mouth, Craig Thornton, and people, and you do something. They'd do something on one weekend, and the next weekend I'd see my guys trying to plate up something like that, or in different, and it was wild, right?
Right.
But that also, where it was a great ultra fast highway to good ideas, it also quickly can become that for some mediocrity as well.
We talked this 1,000 times already, but it's a great analogy to this is when I was a cook in the late 90s, early 2000s, if you wanted to know what was going on in Paris, you had to know somebody that went there and brought back a menu.
Yeah.
And maybe every once in a while, somebody snapped some pictures of the food or the restaurant or got a picture with the chef. You're just holy shit, where did you get this? Yeah. And then you got to take a look, or you waited for some cookbook to come out. The Michelle Brock cookbook was I remember the day the French Laundry cookbook came out.
Yeah.
And I was I didn't know this perfection existed. I was holy shit. And then I was at the French Laundry and the Michelle Brock cookbook came out. And we were all just this is a salad? What the fuck is this? You know?
And I miss that. I mean, I feel this generation of cooks is a little bit robbed. And that doesn't say that there aren't some great publications that come out in places and people who do that and do the full justice of that. But a lot of it is kind of, again, for different reasons. The sensible, the cookbook as a medium isn't what it was.
Oh, man. When's the last time you bought a cookbook?
I mean, I buy them every so often when they're from people who I know that are going to put the heart and soul into it.
A friend or something, yeah.
But I can't tell you how many times I get handed off something that's 30-minute Persian meals or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that is an audience that has its own vector of economics. And our audience of and I think about the books that I really get jazzed up about, they're just not as frequent, and we're a smaller pod. And ultimately, we are the two angry men screaming at the bottom of the well.
100% we are, man. Yeah.
And
was it Andreas Laura we were talking with, Preston? I think it was Andreas that him and I have. I'm sure you can relate to this too. Of going to Barnes and Nobles and like sitting on the floor in
yeah.
Barnes and Nobles, just like flipping through cookbooks and then pulling out my notebook and writing recipes out because I couldn't afford to buy it. And I didn't go back to the restaurant and be like trying out recipes. There's like, that was such part of my weekly routine on my day off. I'd go to Barnes and Nobles and I'd look at another cookbook, the Charlie Trotter books, the Chez Panisse books, like just the Gotham Bar and Grill, like all those like big time Bobby Flay's books, you know? And I'd be like, holy shit, and just hours would go by. I'd sit on the floor in Barnes and Nobles.
Because that was a vehicle for you to engage. Yeah. And like you could dive in there. You could pull your creativity. You were getting that dopamine hit from pulling the pages apart, right? And going,
But it was a feel like, I think like I just thought as you were saying that, like, well, the Barnes and Nobles and the Coke is now is Instagram. And people just like scroll through Instagram. Like, but it's not the same of like, and this is me romanticizing about fucking Barnes and Noble, but like sitting on the floor in a bookshop, picking up a heavy brand new cookbook and the smell of the pages and flipping through it and the feel of how thick some of those expensive cookbooks were and looking at the photography and trying to figure out how they balance that and trying to like think of those flavor combinations and just getting lost inside that book. It's like I feel like a fucking dinosaur talking about this,
I used to, one of my experiences in New York was I would go, anytime I get a paycheck, we get paid every other week, I would go up to, Kitchen Arts and Letters. Yeah. And it was Knock and Matt, and there was usually one or two other people who worked there, and they knew, like, they could tell, like, you were, especially those months where you got 3 paychecks versus your rent payment. Right. Like, he's got some money to burn.
I'm spending today, baby.
Yeah, he's living wild at $60 a pop. And there was general froth and excitement because, you were not distracted from anything else. This was the closest thing that you could do to go and either go to this place or get to know this person or kind of, channel some sort of experience out of, imagery. Now we can do a lot of that. I think we feel like we're ringside in so many different avenues and corners of the world and events and things going on. There's a law of diminishing returns of the pleasure derived from that, because we do it so frequently and with so little effort now, where before it was, it was costly and it was a time commitment and like you had to like kind of plan your day and it would eat up your whole day. But that was part of the fun of it.
Right.
And
I didn't care how long I stood there, man. I would stay there till the fucking place kicked me out, man.
100%.
Yeah.
Because
I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have anything. It was like we had 4 channels at the house, There was nothing else to do besides get out of the house and go eat somewhere.
Yeah.
Go hang out with your friends or go to the bookstore.
I also
feel like a fucking nerd. I feel like a fucking nerd saying that.
Do you? That's all right.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it's sad that the bookstore is like the least trafficked place in a strip mall these days.
Well, I mean, are they even around anymore?
Right, but it's media and print media and all this. Yeah. It's nothing. I listen to a podcast called Pivot I really like, and it's actually, if I can recommend a podcast about something that's not food related but that has very insightful people, there's a lot of really interesting discussions and stuff like that. And one of the things that this guy Scott Galloway says is like, at some point with the evolution of technology, we've and kind of the warp speed evolution of kind of marketing and media, we've gotten to a place now where the value of the content you're creating is disproportionately related to the size of the screen or the complexity of the environment that you can enjoy it within. Which isn't to say like there's places like the Sphere and IMAX and stuff like that that are kind of outliers on this, but that the most theoretically high valued media being created is designed to live on your hip and be in your hand, in and out of your hand in 10 seconds.
Fucking gross. That's fucking scares me, man.
But that's where that has replaced so much of so much of the 10-pound, 20-pound, cookbook. It's funny. I'm looking here. I see.
Yeah, cookbooks everywhere, man.
Yeah, I mean, like I moved back from Spain with a copy of El Bulli. Yeah. I remember when I moved back from Spain, the biggest expense that I had, and it was actually the one that like almost physically buckled me and like economically did. So I had 2 bags that were overweight because I brought back all the
cookbooks. Yeah,
the Montague stuff.
Yeah,
and the stuff that like I was like, this is gonna be that shit that nobody else has seen before.
Yeah. How many times I put cookbooks in boxes and fucking moved them?
Oh,
I mean,
my God.
How many boxes on a moving truck in and out of apartments? Fucking hell, man.
Yeah.
Jesus. I don't know what I was watching. I don't know if maybe it was a podcast. I don't know. They were talking about the way movies are being made. And I'm bastardizing the story, but the bones are correct. They basically did the fucking movie and it goes to like editing, whatever, and it got sent back to them and said, basically, this scene is too involved and there's too much primary information, and you need to bring it to a point where people that are scrolling on their phones can still follow along. And that's how they're making movies. They know we're on the couch watching the movie, looking at our phones. Yeah. So they know that every minute and a half, 2 minutes, we're going to look up, and they are making movies based off of that so we could still pay attention and still understand what's going on in the movies.
Yeah. The artist cinematography, and not to draw like a false comparison here or anything like that, but anything that puts something in front of somebody else for digestion of some manner. We've spent the past 7,500 years, let's say last 50, 75 years refining, develop these crafts, these techniques, dive into them, explore them further. Honestly, there's some evolutionary stuff as we've kind of like come to understand human nature, our biometrics, our physicality. And honestly, you can look to almost a 10-year extinction period of those long developed skills. And interesting if we're talking about sociology, like interesting little like insights into who we are as humans, because now we're chimping. We're constantly like looking at, we're constantly doing things and experiencing things, not for the primary sense of pleasure, but for, the stamp on the passport.
The stamp on, yeah. I think that's a lot with people that eat at Michelin-starred restaurants and want to eat at all of them all the time. It's kind of more of a thing of, I'm going to a badge of honor of, I ate at all the Michelin-starred restaurants in France last year.
They're notches on belts.
It's almost like, I don't think that they enjoy the food anymore. I don't think that they enjoy it. I think that it's a game.
And do you think that also spills onto the creative side of things? I think our industry and a lot of the creative industries are heavily populated with people who are, in their own personal sense, trying to optimize their productivity to creating these experiences as well for like that kind of audience, knowing that audience is what is occurring the most favor or page views or things like that. Like,
I think all industries are making products for social media.
Yeah.
And if they don't, there's definitely a department where they can filter all of that to get it out to social media somehow.
I would say
let's chop that up for a second. Like it's not all doom and gloom. So there was obviously a point where the automobile was invented and they're not using horses anymore. The printing press, those things sped up. Obviously, a lot different from the information we're getting on our phones with social media platforms, with fucking foreign countries influencing elections, including our country influencing other people's elections. But do you think those same conversations were happening when the printing press came around? If it's too much information too fast, do you think there were people sitting around like, why do we need an automobile? We got a perfectly good horse,
100%.
Why do we need gas pumped into our house when we could just, have it? Why do I need water when I got a well in the back? There had to have been those same sort of conversations happening. Like, hey, let's slow this down,
It's funny that you say that. I think about like the horseshoe, right? No one remembers the last generation of, master horseshoe makers, right?
Right.
It's like there's another joking analogy about the guy who makes the best trombone oil, right? Bob Iger talks about, and like,
or you burned your last CD and you didn't know it was going to be your last
exactly.
CD. That's bring current terms.
Exactly.
Right.
We've all put on our like our last pair of lederhosen or something like that, But I think about, again, not to be doom and gloom, and I don't think it's like all net negative from our perspective. I just think that balance is something that we haven't re-achieved, and I think that evolution is going to continue to happen. Technology is going to continue to happen. Like fighting against it or hoping that it kind of winds down or even paces itself is a pretty impossible ask or thought. But I do hope that from our industry and honestly for our society, that at some point there comes a little bit of a correction where we just figure out where there's more time invested into, managing it. So it's not just a free for all, because left unchecked, left unattended, I do think it is something that has a lot of really negative connotations and impacts on all of our lives. And it's not necessarily, I think, anyone's intention, and especially the AI introduction of all this is definitely like AI optimizes for whatever purpose you ask it to optimize. It does not optimize for the sense of, looking after, the mental health of your kids. It doesn't optimize for the kind of, the individual creativities and stuff like that. It definitely like circumvents those things. It has its own agenda.
Right.
I think that we need to be as a society, and this sounds like talking on a soapbox, but we need to make a case and advocate for, being human again, and having that exist in the context and the balance of where all the technology goes. And I think in hospitality and restaurants, the prime example is that it's like, I want people to come into our places and enjoy the company of being around other people and enjoy the product.
That's it. Come in and have dinner.
Yeah. Have a good time.
Have a good time, man. Like, put the phone away.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit that what you had for dessert.
Yeah.
No one cares, man.
Yep. And that dessert isn't going to be, maybe it is some, maybe you're memorializing something specific,
which is fine. No problem.
Yeah. You've
got problem. But when all of your feed is everything you ate all day, and there's like a granola bowl,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I stopped posting a lot of food pics unless I'm supporting my friends or something so exceptional that it's like, bro, I just had a mind body experience here, man.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to come check this out. But posting a slice of watermelon that I ate earlier today is, I don't know, man.
Yeah. I don't need a real time, kind of, daily log and like,
even for myself, I don't need to go back and look at the fireworks from 2016's 4th of July and be like, oh yeah, man, those are really good.
It's funny. We were talking about French Laundry, Thomas Keller, his kind of, pillars of thoughts, and like where the shift happened in sort of kind of, current state of the food world and whatnot. But there's a very tangible, sensible principle that he harkens back to often. It's the law of diminishing returns, which is the idea that, and the premise that was always presented when you dine at the restaurant, you get one or two, hopefully spectacular bites, because like, after bite 3 or 4, you're eating. You're not really experiencing like that first date, that first time hearing a band, that first time seeing a piece of art, that first time driving a car,
first time having a white truffle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or caviar or anything. Yeah.
Any of those things. And I think that, all of where we, kind of interface right now, we've lost sort of the importance of that, and the kind of the principal experience.
Did we lose it, or was it taken away from us?
That's a good question. So like, is it taken away because we're kind of, goaded into technology, or are we just constantly, we have so much access now to all of these things that we're kind of like, we've desensitized ourselves a little bit. Like, I got to be honest with you, like the fun of like white truffles and stuff like that is seeing them come out of that cloth that dude brings into the restaurant, and the fucking room smells like white truffles, and like
showing them to like a server that's never seen them before, and getting pleasure of watching them geek out over it, like fuck yeah, man.
Pulling a brush out and cleaning the sink, and like that first time you shave it, oh shit, that was too thick, and like, you know, like the scarcity element of it, right? And then there's a little bit of, obviously, in that analogy, kind of like a little bit of, you know, there's a little bit of hubris to maybe be experienced, because, you know, that's a luxury ingredient, and that's really cut to such a small audience. Mm-hmm. But now everybody knows what white truffle is. Everybody's seen white truffles getting shaved on salt-based steak or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, it just doesn't feel, and like when you
put them on spam. It's like it's kind of been done.
It doesn't feel that special. Yeah. It's not like we don't have as many surprises or gestures that we can pull from our bags to, like, you know, pique people's interest.
But I think you touched on it before. I think it's the hospitality that's going to come back. I think people are going to want experience of going to a restaurant and feeling special, or going to a place and knowing that the chef or the owner is there greeting you at the door. You know, you've been there a whole bunch of times. They recognize that. You know, I think that's what me and Matthew kind of lean into at Iggy's is our Midwestern sense of hospitality, and I feel like it really resonates with the staff, that we're both there, washing dishes, polishing silverware, whatever it takes, and that they see us interacting with the guests, and it's not a negative experience, it's not a negative environment, and I truly think like people are gonna want. Well, they already say like Gen Z will spend money on experiences. You know, they're not gonna spend money on putting themselves into endless debt to go to college. They're not going to spend money on, you know, putting money in the stock market or 401k because they don't believe in it, but they will go into debt to go to Italy for 2 weeks. Yeah. And I feel like the restaurant industry being stagnant or uncreative, I think the hospitality side of inviting people into your home and cooking them a meal and being gracious, saying goodbye when they leave, or remembering the drink that they had when they came in last time, I think that is going to be the driving force of where restaurants are going to go. And it's going to start ramping up again. I'm sure, not again, but I'm sure people are already doing it. But at least for us, that's what we're leaning into a little bit more. It's like, we make pasta. Yeah. You know, like there's only so much you can do with it. It's good. I think it's delicious. It's at a good price point for the economy that we're in right now, but I think people knowing, especially in the neighborhood, that they're going to go and see Ryan and Matthew and we're going to be there. Yeah. I think that's the special thing that people want. I think
to go back to where we currently stand with sort of technology as like such a big, you know, as a big piece of sort of our day-to-day lives, and where I think, and I hope for my kids' generation, hopefully we kind of overcorrect while we're still, you know, very much involved in this, especially as operators, is that we put back a premium of human interaction, and like we put back a value and a currency on like, hey, this guy came over and, you know, they engage with our table, eye contact, you know,
hey, thanks for coming,
hey,
thanks for coming.
Exactly.
I appreciate you giving us a chance. I've been saying that a lot to people. Like, your first time here, like, we had an amazing. I'm like, I appreciate you giving us a chance. Hopefully you'll come back. I've been saying that a lot because it's fucking true.
Yeah. I write back to every single open table review we get.
So does Matthew,
Every single one. For the past 6 years, I've written back positive, mediocre. We've had the whole spectrum. Luckily, we're more weighted on the positive side. Even the positive ones, you know, like when I write back and I say thank you, we're gracious, or we have gratitude, it's not me sending a form letter. It's me consciously acknowledging that, A, you took the time to make a reservation to come to my restaurant. B, you showed up at my restaurant and participated in the economics of my business. And C, you took the time that you didn't have to do to respond to that
respond
email.
to it. Yeah, of an internal. It's open table's like an internal, right?
It's internal, but like, sometimes people can kind of, just like, you can click through it and it's an easy email to delete, right? But you took
No, but I mean, like when they write the review, it comes. It's not a public,
not public facing.
It's internal. Yeah,
I mostly keep all of our comms, just between us and the guests.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing, like, someone who came to my business and had 3 touch points and three overtures of effort put to participate in something I try to operate as a commercial endeavor, whatever that means these days, but with the hopeful, outcome being that they leave happy. And even if they don't leave happy, if they leave a 4-star review and there's kind of a mixed gradient of sort of responses and stuff like that, that's somebody who's actually here and they're actually as interesting, if not more interesting, than our just kind of, couched 5-star reviews.
Right.
That's somebody who's like giving us feedback, and like they are actually giving us something in exchange as well. And it sounds really silly. Those things, obviously, we're responding to good reviews and lukewarm but positive reviews. But we were talking about it before, even like going back after, like, sometimes we get negative reviews and reviews that I can empathetically understand someone's experience and outcome. People drive 25, 35. I'm not close to anything, right? I'm a destination restaurant.
Their day off. They got a babysitter. Maybe they don't get out all the time. It's their anniversary. They've been saving up. I think we take it for granted that we have access to restaurants and ingredients, even our own restaurants. I come home and it's like, I brought some stuff home from the restaurant and, make crab pasta at home. But people don't get to eat that all the time.
No.
And especially in this economy, it's like people don't have excess money to like go out to dinner. And no matter what the restaurant is, no matter how this is an event that they've been thinking about, that their friends have been telling them they got to go to. And finally, they've made it to your restaurant. 100%. And all that build up, and there was no over expectation, but for whatever reason, they had a shit time. And now it's like, fuck. And they waited 3 months to get there. Or they waited however long. No matter a super casual place or like a 3-star Michelin place. Doesn't matter.
100%.
Like, fuck, man.
We
fucked up their experience.
Those are the ones that always hit me the hardest.
They sting.
Because now I'm a dad and I'm like, look, we go out to...
I get it,
It's like
get it.
It isn't up... Like, we get those random nights where we go and, like, commit that time to ourselves. And we have to, get so many other, universes and into orbit to make these things happen. Like, that time is precious. And that's a commodity that, if we don't optimize on it, if we don't have the best experience, and especially when it's stuff that, like, I know that we could do better on it, or, every restaurant has a bad night, right? There's always hardships and stuff like that. And you never know. Like, that person got dropped into the section with somebody who's you never know. Whatever, know? And, like, but now I personally feel like I have an obligation to either overcorrect here or at least offer them the acknowledgement and the awareness that, like, look, I noticed that you've had a bad experience. A, I would love the opportunity for redemption. We'd love to show them that we care. And B, if they never go back to my restaurant, I want them to leave knowing that, like, they didn't just chalk it up as like, oh, crap night, and like kind of like, didn't show face and show the appreciation that we made the effort to come out to see them. Mm-hmm. And that has been starched out of a lot of places. Honestly, a lot of restaurants, for efficiency and whatnot, have eliminated a lot of the hospitality roles, especially above, kind of the service level, or those things have become hybridized, and you don't have people who are like, actually truly tuned into what's happening in these places. And I think those are pretty negative aspects of a hospitality experience. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, it's not necessarily specifically attached to just pricing, because we have places that do that really well. And I feel like you get people who care through up and down the organization. They're not always the most expensive places, not always the most always creative places, but like, those are the places where I feel like we gravitate back towards. One perfect example, there's a place called Alpine Inn in Portola Valley in Silicon Valley. It's, at best, it's great quality food. It's very informal. They love it when we show up. They play with my kid. They come over, they check in on us, and it's not done because they're like, just checking boxes.
Yeah.
They like come over and like, it feels really good to see them. And I know that they do that for 300 to 400 or 500 people a night. Mm-hmm. And like, that's not replicatable. That is its own unique beast. But I know that that's like that is the premium. That is the most optimal quality place. And, I'm sure you've been, we were talking about earlier, I've been out on meals, especially the past couple of years, that were like, put down the credit card and this is a couple payments down to get back out of the water on.
Yeah.
And you get kind of like, you get very clinical, non-empathetic service and hospitality that just is kind of, going through the motions.
Going through the motions is the worst.
Yeah.
I would rather see someone actually having a bad day where I can relate to like, oh fuck, dude, you just got triple sat. Like,
yeah,
you might be the first time you're a captain. Like, oh, I fucking get it, man, dude. Just, I got it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Then someone just going through the motions, food goes down, simple explanation, take 2 bites, they clear it, crumb, new wine glass goes down. 2 minutes later, they pour, they talk about the wine.
Yeah.
Dish goes down, crumb, just like, there's no soul in that.
Yeah. And I think that the soul of what we're doing and the actually trying to create economic environments where we can attract people who help us bring these things to life on a day-to-day basis, who, buy in on that, are the biggest challenges ahead of where restaurants are right now. But I also think there's opportunity there because
there is, yeah.
Like this is where people want to come. Mm-hmm. People want to go places where they get eye contact, where people remember them. They feel like they're valued to be there, and they don't feel like they're coming as kind of like a feedlot. And that is, that's a shifting landscape.
I really think that it's really coming. I can feel it already. It's really coming to, they want to see the people that are working at the restaurant. They want to see them there. At least I feel it in Nashville,
For sure.
I feel like in Chicago it was that way when I was there. There's a big emphasis on making sure the chef is there, the owner's there to greet you. But I feel it kind of, I don't know if the industry loses its way. That's not a good. It just kind of like ebbs and flows like everything else. It's a living, breathing thing, and it just kind of comes and goes. And I wouldn't say maybe stagnant isn't the right word, but it's figuring itself out. Maybe it's maybe the restaurant industry is backpacking across Europe right now.
I think we're all exhausted because things have happened around us so fast, and we're always the restaurant industry, as far as a business, was always constantly nimble and evolving and doing all this other stuff to tune itself to its audience. I think it's like one of the most important things. It's not like, music changes over time, but it's a longer evolution.
It's longer, yeah. Also, it's like you put a shitty album out, you can get back in the studio, and a year later you put another great album out. You put a shitty restaurant out, you're in a lot of trouble for a long time, man.
And every day you're coming in to like update and modify and change and improve and tune and like value engineer things in and out of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But hospitality, I think, is at a phase 2 where like I think we kind of got oversaturated with a lot of attention, some of it maybe not necessary, into a place where everybody was just kind of like burned out. Mm-hmm. And we're all kind of recalibrating, and it's hard to do that in real time, especially the pandemic is, and I hate to circle back and use that as like kind of an anchor point, but like using that as like as sort of a benchmark, and coming back, everybody's like, oh, we're going to be like this new enlightened era of people's enthusiasm and appreciation for the hospitality world because we didn't have it for this period of time.
You're essential worker, so you're not an essential worker anymore.
Yeah. But now we're back. We're like almost, back locks up where we were in 2019, where it's like,
more aggressive.
Yeah. I think that's the other situation.
I guess are more hostile.
Yeah. And the entitlement is different. It's like someone who's already coming to your restaurant that's been overserved a little bit. People are already overserved, kind of an expectation.
That's a great point. That's a really great point. Because there's so much content for them to go and see, and the influencer that the restaurant paid to say good things about it. So they see that. Then they see, all the dishes that you're posting and how delicious it looks. And then they get there and those expectations have been amplified.
Yeah.
And even though
God forbid you don't have one of them.
God forbid you run out of garlic bread or something,
Yeah.
And I think, that's an interesting one. Are people's expectations too fucking high?
I don't know, but I would say that I do think that, especially as I think we're all sort of in the dust settling mode of, kind of some new norms of where media has placed itself as in the forefront of each of us in terms of like what it's feeding us, our understanding of how that, kind of impacts or how that's filtered towards us, our understanding that, we're being stimulated. We're being this is a diet that we're on right now. Yeah. I think that we will get back to a place where people want to just take a little step back and they want to like kind of ground themselves. Yeah. And that might create another renaissance for hospitality and restaurant world.
I hope so.
I
don't think it's not all doom and gloom. We're having a great time.
Yeah.
But it's not where it was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And
in a lot of which ways, maybe that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. Yeah. It's a thing.
It's a thing. But I think we all have to kind of like...
The dust's not settling, I think, is a great analogy. I think you're right, man.
Yeah.
I think people are still hanging on from COVID, barely making it,
Yeah. I think that... it's interesting for me because my restaurant operates and a large tranche of the people who come and participate in our business as guests are seeing the next 5 to 10 years and seeing so much further down the road.
So explain where you're at.
Yeah.
Let's just start back. We just started in the middle of the conversation.
Yeah.
Let's put that on hold. So you're talking about the guests that come to the restaurant, how the neighborhood that you're in is very tech driven and they're looking 5 to 10 years. Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so pause on that for a sec. Yeah. Let's just go back to the original How Did I Get Here podcast. Like,
okay,
who the fuck are you? Why are you on my couch?
Hey, yeah. This is a dude we just found. Bumbling around Nashville.
So, that's it. So how did you get started cooking?
Yeah.
You're from upstate New York?
Yeah. I'm from Albany, New York, which is it's the capital of New York State, but in so many which ways it's kind of I won't say depressed, but it's like, it's a smaller
Albany's not depressing, is it?
It's a mid-tier bureaucratic driven, kind of, center of commerce.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting for me because, my upbringing was, I had two creative parents who both had kind of like jobs sort of on the fringe of bureaucracy in some manner, but very creative sort of like lifestyles. Okay. And very early on, I was encouraged to, explore that piece of my life, and I was encouraged to be creative. I was given some runway to like kind of, play the guitar a little louder, go to the concert, paint the thing. Like not everything had to have a purpose, but like I wasn't driven into sort of a lifestyle where I was expected, some performance driven.
You weren't driven into a lifestyle of you need to buy a car with good gas, you need to get a job that has good benefits.
Well,
you need to, you need
that
a 401k,
came later. No, I wasn't put on like a plan to these were the benchmarks that you had to clear to like, win favor within the household, which was great for me because, I was definitely short attention span, very attracted to the creative kind of experience and sort of the way that made me feel. And I grew up snowboarding and skateboarding and like really wanting to be a part of that world. I thought that world was like super cool. And where we were was lucky enough proximity wise to like sort of maybe kind of, beat an interest into my head that I could pursue that maybe as like a possible job or lifestyle or whatnot. But I couldn't match the skill set and all the other things of it. So when I was, in high school, my first few years, and I wanted to buy a car because I wanted to get out of Albany and explore and go all over New England. I was basically the way I could economically provide for that. So I got a job in a restaurant, and I found a place by our house that would hire me basically as a dishwasher, prep cook, whatever. And that old age tale of like, oh, he came in 1 week and 3 weeks later, they were letting him, cut steaks and
I was working the fucking broiler.
Yeah, someone doesn't show up, and then all of a sudden, Greg, who's like available Fridays and Saturday nights, is like the perfect dude to be dunking fries. And I like immediately loved that environment. I had a boss when I was a kid who, I'll be honest with you, if I didn't have this guy as a boss, I would have done it for a summer, raised enough money to buy a car, gone back to school, and called it a day.
Really?
But this dude was named Keith Smith, and he was this like dude in his mid-30s who was like, he was from Texas. He was raunchy and goofy and funny. He listened to Rush every... Dude, I can tell you,
prog rock.
We listened to Rush so much that first summer I was there. I literally thought, it was perfect time for me, pre-pubescent to like sing Geddy Lee, but like I was like addicted. I was hooked, and the dude was a lot of fun. It could have been he was constantly had his back pushed up against the wall. The restaurant was super busy. It was tiny. It was like a little neighborhood Italian, Italian joint. But that had some like local appreciation, and it was on the fringe of town, kind of bordering. It was on the pathway from leaving downtown Albany, going to a bedroom community called Bethlehem, where kind of like everybody who was of ways and means lived. So it was like a perfect stop along the way. Yeah. And I was like, hindsight, the perfect employee, right? I paid like $70 a night to come in and like work the hardest, busiest night. And do it with glee because, my net goal was to, buy a car or something like that. Car, yeah. And
so you could snowboard.
Yeah, exactly. So I could snowboard, so I could get out and explore. And but those guys were all interesting, good influences, bad influences, but they were more compelling people than I was surrounded by in my peer group. And I dug it. I just, I stuck with it. They had a course in high school, which I ended up taking where, I was doing some production there, and that, one thing led to another, and I ended up down to the CIA, which was about an hour from my house. And I don't know, it was one of these things that was kind of a snowball effect. I really built a lot of excitement about it. It was also a period of time too where I was an hour from the CIA, and I was 3 hours from New York City. So at the time when I actually got to school, I was 18, and I had this, I had basically figured it out where I could work some on the weekends, and then every month or so I would go down to New York City and stage somewhere. So
where was your first stage?
First stage was a little restaurant in Brooklyn called Applewood. It was a guy named David Shea. My cousin, who actually ended up being in the hospitality world too, she was the pastry chef there. And it was this tiny little like mom and pop, like David worked the line with one other guy, and one person washed dishes, and my cousin Sarah made like all these, beautiful, simple, homey, but delicious pastries. And he was kind of like a little bit of like a folk hero in Brooklyn. He was out in Brooklyn Heights, or I think it was Brooklyn, Park Slope. And, but he was an expat of like...
Park Slope back then must have been... Jesus, man.
I'm telling you, the restaurant was the size of your kitchen, your room here.
Really?
But, he would go out and he knew all the guests. And they were like all these luminaries and, famous writers. And it was all really like interesting, cool people. And that's what, again, set the hook in me. You were surrounded by cool people who were doing cool stuff for other cool people. And I was at that phase trying to figure out, probably I wanted to do an internship in New York City. Some other stuff kind of on the peripheral. We had a death in our family, kind of like intercepted that experience. But I also interviewed and spent a little bit of time at Aquavit, But then as you kind of got into this like little network of people, you realize that there were other kids at the school who were doing the same thing. You'd see them go down on Metro North on the train, and you kind of became friends with this like little crew of people who were like pretty impassioned about like, you know, restaurants and hospitality. Where are you going this weekend? Where are you going?
Where'd you eat at?
Yeah. And like, you know, kind of, you know, sharing each other's note cards and stuff like that. And you built your friend network that way. And that ultimately, as silly as it sounds, kind of put you around people who were really, you know, driven by the creativity and that, you know, era of, you know, this was 2003, 4 of places, you know, New York City was still in the sort of, this is kind of like wake of 9/11, but at the same time, business was starting to resume and restaurants were booming. And it was certainly like getting some visibility because it was on the backs of sort of the era of Anthony Bourdain.
Right.
Food arts was big, you know, food and wine, gourmet, all that. It was all anchored there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I got that
was the fucking heyday of everything, man. Yeah.
And like you go places and like they'd be like, oh, this food writer's here this weekend, and you know, it was a little bit of like kind of a Renaissance era. Mm-hmm. And
albeit started climbing the ranks. If they had in 2003, they probably were already big by then. Yeah.
03, 04, 05 was sort of the Spanish, you know, kind of Madrid fusion. And, you know, kind of, you know,
it was like mainstream. Like I first heard about albeit like 99, 2000, or like, there's these, it was just like a whisper of these Spanish guys in Barcelona doing some crazy shit. And I was like, well, Michel Bras just put a book out, you know?
Yeah.
And then in the 2003, 4 was the Madrid Fusions, yeah.
Well,
everybody just waiting on bated breath to see what technique they're going to come up with now. And it's, a gelatin spaghetti noodle. Like, okay, everybody's making spaghetti noodles now.
Totally. Well, and then it was funny because the books came over. And before, you know, everybody was making their pilgrimage to go to these places, the books were coming. So you would start seeing this, like, you know, very hyper modern, the early stages of molecular gastronomy. And all of a sudden you start seeing that in restaurants and stuff like that. I remember at Applewood, in fact, he had a dish that was basically like a mussel soup that the dude, you know, dropped a little soy lecithin in and frothed it before sending it out. And it was, again, you know, hindsight, very simple gesture, but like I had never seen that before.
Right.
I came back to the school. I was like, dude, I saw this guy who was working a station with a stick blender on it the entire time. And every order that came in and out, he buzzed it and it was like frothy. And it was like, just like, it looked like the tides in Cape Cod settling on the rocks. And
I remember I was at this French restaurant where I got in trouble because there was too many bubbles in the creme anglaise. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, and now fast forward 5 years, it's like we're putting machines into the creme anglaise to make bubbles. You know, like, fuck off,
you
man.
Pull that out of a siphon now?
Like, yeah, fuck off.
Oh, it always goes full circle, right? All the things that I thought were like, you're trying to get away from it. Don't burn things. Comes back, burn everything.
Burn everything. Yeah. Burn it. Scorch it. Yeah.
Seriously. But that set me, I mean, like.
So where else did you stage at then?
My stages, I did John George. I was lucky enough. John George's son was my neighbor in cooking school.
Oh, right on.
And he'd actually done his internship at albeit. Cedric. I like nerded out on. He had all the books, and it was like he had basically all the keys to going to all the cool places. in the world.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Must be nice having a dad like that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, he was humble and he could cook, man.
Yeah.
I remember like. It was fascinating. I met Ferran years later, and you know, Cedric was and is still highly regarded as like one of these guys who could certainly have like skipped the line a little bit, but you know, did his fair share of like pulling brains out of rabbits and you know, scaling fish and washing plates and stuff.
I always liked John George. I figured he's pretty down to earth. You know, probably made his son go through the rigmarole.
Yeah.
You ain't getting a pass, dude.
I just remember that night I staged with John George. I was really taken back. Everybody was super young. They were all excited to be there.
Who was wrong? Who was in the kitchen then?
Who was in the kitchen then? Preston Clark. My friend Grayson Schmitz. Mark Lapico had just been named chef de cuisine, which is funny now because Mark is still involved in that.
Yeah.
And like, you know, but back then, like 23, 24 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
Cedric was there. I can't remember. Johnny was on pastry, and I mean, again, this like crew of people who all went on to do amazing things.
Yeah.
And I watched the service again. Open kitchen, first time seeing that. Kitchen with toques, first time seeing that. Kitchen with very beautiful French bonnet and Mauviels.
Shiny.
Oh, dude! I just remember watching them pull a canal of this like purple palm puree, and it was and he put one down and it didn't look great, and like, I'll pull it back to the pan and I'll get another one going. And it was the first time I've ever seen someone like replate something, like consciously like think about like this is I'm not super satisfied with this, and I've got an opportunity.
You're not in a bistro anymore, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just throw the parsley on, get it out in the dining room, right? And yeah, it was it was an incredible night, and I get to eat half the menu. Again, I'm like a 19-year-old kid. I'm not in the tax bracket to be having white truffles for white truffle season. And all of a sudden, there's hand cut tagliatelle with white truffles in front of me.
Yeah,
I had the egg with the caviar, and again, this is another one of those things like they probably like scoff through 4 of them a night,
right? Screwed it up or something. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
exactly.
misfire. Here you go, buddy.
Someone got up from the table and they replayed it.
Yeah,
but those things were like really impactful on me. And I remember I got back to the school. I got both of his books at that point that weekend. And I just made it a pattern over the course of my entire time at the CIA. I like, as much as possible, I would go down to the city. I would try to spend a night in a place, or I would try to go down and eat somewhere if I could afford it, if I could save up and do that.
What was the first meal that had like huge impact on you?
Oh man, it's funny. I always think it's one thing, but I had. I'll have to come back to that. The most interesting meals I had early on, I went with my cousin who was working at Applewood. They sat me down and this maybe is a little bit of a not the same comparison, but at Aquavit, I was there one night and Niels Noren was the chef. Mm-hmm. And he, I think, set me up on a table or something like that and cooked me a bunch of the food. Oh, he set me up on a table in the breezeway, and they sent me a bunch. And this is again, I was like I was staging to try to get an extern there.
Yeah.
And they sent me a bunch of the signature dishes and like oysters with yuzu and the foie gras like panna cotta that they'd set, foie gras custard. And again, I was just like, I've never had this in its initial format, let alone this like hyper stylized,
right,
modern technique and beautiful plating. But I remember that night I like hung out, cleaned down the kitchen with him, and he repacked all the herring, which is a very like visceral memory. It was like right around the holidays. And they set me up with a deli of glog, like warm stewed wine. And I stayed my mom got me a hotel room outside of Times Square. And I just remember like 19-year-old kid like walking through the city with like a warm pitcher of glog through like right around like the Times Square area, or right around kind of like the Rock Center area, and I was like, oh, this is the life.
This is living, man.
I was hooked again.
Yeah. So where did you wind up doing your internship at?
I ended up in the Adirondacks. I was at a restaurant within a resort called the Sagamore.
Why didn't you go to John George?
So my grandfather ended up getting really sick in the weeks leading up to me kind of setting off. And we just all made the decision that given all these things, especially if he was going to get sick and possibly pass away, that proximity to, if I had to interrupt or something like that. And then he did end up actually passing away.
It's the right move.
Yeah, and it was the right move. And it was one of those last moves in my life that I really felt like, not to say last moves, but it was one of those moves in my life where I felt like it was important for me to kind of separate my, kind of outsized aspirations against, a little bit of a sensibility of like being a real person and having a reference point to like my family and stuff like that. And I experience a lot of the same feelings that I have now, with having a kid and maybe making some decisions around those priorities as I did at that point. But I got back to school, and my externship was awesome. Being in the Adirondacks and being at a place, again, a really ambitious restaurant that just so happened to be in a resort that in the summertime, it might as well have been in, on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan.
You probably got to do a lot more too.
Yeah, and the food was beautiful. Like that property was a 5 diamond space.
Oh wow! Okay.
And dinner only, and they were fucking going for it, man.
Yeah.
And I was like, again, another one of those, like, there's an intern, and like 3 days in, somebody overslept their alarm clock or whatever, and, you know, chop. And all of a sudden I'm like on the line with these guys who were all basically either taking summer jobs coming out of New York City or were like from bigger markets, and they were all super talented. It was like one of those places where you're like, holy shit, this is, I don't think I'm cut out for this team here. You know, you guys sure you got the right guy?
Right.
But
what is that, imposter syndrome?
Yeah. Serious.
It's real sometimes. Yeah.
But I learned a ton, and those guys all became really good friends. And a lot of those guys actually did, you know, return and go back to like New York City or other places, Boston. And, you know, it was good because they all became kind of like sequences for, you know, my career path. And as I went back to school, I did another 2 years because I did a business component as well for the CIA's, you know, culinary and business program.
You think that helped you?
Yes. I'll say this. I think that, at least for me, gave me more time and exposure to things that helped me sort of, you know, ground my sensibilities a little bit, mature a little bit.
Yeah.
And also be put in front of some things that now I use, you know, P&L reading and some things like that. I think that not everybody gets the biggest benefit out of it, but I was a sponge, and I was a fanatic, you know. I made the most of every single little nook and cranny as I could on that space, and I felt like I took a lot away from it.
Yeah.
But you know, then, you know, nothing. Everybody you can watch as many fucking videos on how to skydive.
Yeah.
Get kicked out of a fucking plane the first time without a guy on your back.
Right.
I don't care how.
How prepared you think you are. Right. Yeah.
You got to do it. You got to get out of the plane.
I learned the financials. Well, I never went to school, so I never had the opportunity to do it. But I feel like if I would have taken, at school was never for me. I never liked school.
Yeah.
I never liked sitting in classroom. I think, at least on the business side of it, I think if I would have taken those classes at, you know, 20, 22, 23 years old, it would have been like fell on deaf ears because I wasn't ready to experience that. I wasn't ready to hear it because I was so like uber focused on just becoming a great cook.
Yeah.
That almost like the business world didn't really exist to me. And then I feel like everything happens when you're ready for it to happen. And when the time did come for me to learn it, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like the menu's fine. I got the team. Now let's start focusing on.
I think the business stuff is interesting because, I mean, there's people who go through their entire career and never really get a mastery of it. And if you want to be an owner operator, at some point, you know, you're going to have to click on a piece of your brain that like gets it and thinks about this stuff and takes a very different approach.
Yeah.
If I had known now what I know, I would have gone about my approach and kind of experienced it a little differently. I'd probably given myself a couple of years out in the industry and gone back just to, you know,
a point of reference.
Yeah, a little point of reference. And to do it, like I said, like, I think that it wasn't lost on me, it wasn't wasted on me, but like, I got the 80th percentile program, as opposed to like, I could have gotten a lot more if I had just seen a little more and I was a little bit more experienced, a little more mature.
Right.
But it's, you know, I haven't been, my thought is on cooking schools and education is it's hard to give blanketed advice on like whether it's beneficial to anybody because not everybody excels in that environment. Not everybody.
It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, it's not. And I say the same thing. It's like recommending a restaurant too, right? Like, you got to ask a lot more questions. And for me, I got a lot out of it.
Recommending a show to watch. I'm like, nah, I don't think so, man. No. I think your likes on what shows you like are completely different from mine. I don't want to be. Listen, I don't have much time on my free time, and I'm not, you know, going to get invested four episodes into a 2-season show and realize I hate it. So I'm gonna pass on, you know.
Well, then it becomes the kind of thing, and this is my experience on a lot of stuff. I won't, and that's a good reference point. Is I won't watch something sometimes until it's like already had season finale. It's been under wraps for a couple years.
Vetted, yeah.
And then I'll go back and I'll chance like, fuck, this happened in real time, and I missed the week to week, you know, kind of like anticipation event that all my friends were dialed in on. I watched Breaking Bad over the pandemic, and I just remember thinking like, I kind of get it now.
Yeah.
It is kind of a cliffhanger, or Ozark or something.
Ozark,
crazy.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of watching the new Lord of the Rings, the Ring of Power thing, and it's just like, come on, guys, you know?
I just, it's hard for me to to not do it. Like I can chain smoke it. I can do it.
Yeah, I would rather just put them all out at once.
Yeah.
Like, what? Come on. First of all, it's a streaming service. This isn't Channel 5. Okay? Like, we don't have to wait till every Saturday night to watch. Just put them all out at once. We're all going to watch them.
Totally.
And just let us have this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And
you're tuning into
I don't do
Apple TV every Saturday night at 5. Like, oh, it's on. Like, I can't pause it and record it, watch whatever I want. Like, we're far beyond that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I also am a creature of convenience too. Like when I commit to time to do something or have the time to do it, I just like do it in its entirety. Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to like half build a house.
Because then, I'll forget that it's there, and then 2 weeks will go by, and then like another week will go by. I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. And then I got to go back and rewatch the first 3 episodes anyway because I have no idea what's going on because I forgot. So stop fucking around with us, man. Just give it to us.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I've a whole media world and like honestly movies in general. I used to love going to movies, right? Because I love sitting somewhere for about 90 minutes and getting soup to nuts and entirety of the experience. But that doesn't exist anymore. Like
I can't sit for a movie. I tried. First of all,
what was the last movie you saw in a theater?
Okay, great story. 2 days ago, we went and saw Daredevil Wolverine, and we walked out like probably 40 minutes into it. Not even 40 minutes into it. I thought it was so terrible. I thought it was just a terrible movie. And then before that, I saw the Guardians of the Galaxy, the latest one, and I thought that was just awesome.
Yeah.
And I had eaten like a 20 milligram edible too, so I was like locked in the chair with like a huge bowl of popcorn.
Hold on.
I didn't do that this time, but I thought that movie was really, really good.
Yeah.
And the Daredevil movie, what is it? Not Daredevil. Deadpool. Yeah, Deadpool Wolverine. I don't even know the name of the movie. I didn't think. I wanted to go see Beetlejuice.
Oh,
I thought that would be. Everyone's saying it's really good.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I think it was. I don't think the movie might have been bad. I think it's a little bit of me as like I don't think I can sit in a theater for 2.5 hours anymore. I just can't. If it's not anything less than a 3-minute clip on Instagram or YouTube, I don't think I can watch anymore.
Yeah,
and I think it's a very sad thing that I realized.
I find myself watching things now that are more. I know the full arc, right, and I can see it in one shot. And that aren't going to kind of like bait you on or kind of like,
recycle same jokes from 3 movies ago.
Yeah.
And I think like, I don't know if you're into the Marvel movies or not,
No, but,
yeah, I think like they put out this whole thing with this Endgame and this bad guy Thanos. It was fucking dope, man. It was like 10 years of all these like characters and all these like movies all coming together, and they're doing it again, and it's extremely confusing. I think it's really, really confusing, and I don't know if I have it in me to do like another 10 years of Marvel movies.
The franchising of a lot of these things, I feel like, and this is maybe my false equivalency, but it's like when you hand off to a sous chef the first opportunity to like put a dish on a menu, and like they want to impress you, and they want to like they want to have like all these like pops and textures and wow moments and this and like, oh, but did you also pick that up? And then at the same time, you're also like, there's just so much shit going on right now.
Yeah.
Like I miss like a Coen Brothers movie. Just like
dry.
Yeah.
Not a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
Bring me the guy from No Country for Old Men that shoots people in the head. It doesn't say a fucking word, man. Give me that guy in every movie. I just want to sit in silence.
Exactly. And I said,
impress me with a cacio pepe.
Bring that back.
3 ingredients, man. Bring that guy back.
I bring that back to the kitchen too. I'm like, dude, I am listening right now to like some like trip hop or something.
Mumble
like,
rap. Yeah.
I need like Neil Young acoustic guitar. Like nobody. I can barely get this. And we all need to like come back to like find our like central.
Bring me Nirvana Unplugged.
Seriously,
just give it to me, man.
Yeah.
Play the David Bowie song. I'm gonna be fine.
Exactly. Yep. But yeah, that's a fascinating. Again, with the creative parallels in other industries, we have a lot of media and stuff like that. We have a lot of people who kind of come up, especially being in California on the West Coast, like that the sensibilities of people and people trying to build industries, which is the other thing, around these franchises and bigger enterprises and scaling things is, and to bring it back to the restaurant piece of it, like those folks who are so saturated in doing that, are venture capital associated with media things.
Right.
When those people are like completely, deployed mentally, and they show up and the thing they want is gin and tonic made a certain way, a certain BTG SKU that we always have kicking around, or they want our burger. They want something, and then they want like just a little bit of like eye contact and someone to talk to them.
Yeah.
That's when it sounds really silly, but that's when I get like most optimistic about like, I think like eventually we're all gonna like be at the party and look around each other like, this is a little fucking bizarro, right?
Yeah, this party sucks.
Yeah, like, it's time to fucking rap.
Right.
Let's
bring
rap
the
and
90s hip hop back, man. I don't want to listen to shit anymore. Give me the hammer dance.
I've heard enough stuff coming through, like auto tune and whatever for
right, yeah.
But yeah, and my little career arc, I ended up in Boston for a little while, worked for Ken Oringer. And he hooked me up. I got to go to Mugaritz by an introduction there.
So funny story there. When I was staging at La Broche with Sergio Rolla, and me and my friend Michael, who has a restaurant in Toronto, Edlus, he's Canadian. We went to Mugaritz to eat, and Ken Oringer and
Andoni.
No, he was having dinner. Ken Oringer and who's the Asian guy with the long hair?
Oh, Minsai?
No.
Suser
Lee was
yes.
there. And they were having dinner, and he's like, we talked about Suser Lee all the time because Michael's Canadian, and he had all these crazy stories about how he'd make all the sauces at home and nobody ever knew. It's like bizarre,
don't want to give you the
folklore. Yeah, give you like
you open the book and it's like 71 ingredients.
You would have a quarter of the recipe, and he'd have another quarter of the recipe, and then
like the Carthusian monks or something like that.
Yeah, you'd bring everything to him, and he'd make it. And nobody really knew what the fuck was. All these like folklore. This guy, it was just kind of like. We always were just kind of talking about Sushi Lee and other restaurants in Canada and things in America. He was the only guy that spoke English, and I didn't speak much Spanish, so we became instant friends. And he goes, "You're never gonna believe who's sitting behind you." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Sushi Lee's sitting behind you." And I'm like, "Get the fuck out!" No, he's not. And I didn't turn around for like a while. He's like, "Dude, you got to turn around." I'm like, "Dude, he's with Ken Oringer." And then we went and said hello to Ken, and they were so nice, man.
Yeah.
But it was funny they were sitting behind us when we ate there.
Ken was like, it was interesting.
Ken loves Spain, man. He was all about it.
Loves Spain.
Yeah.
So I worked at Toro in Boston, and Toro was, I think, the restaurant that Ken really wanted to do, and he obviously garnered a lot of his acclaim and notoriety through Clio.
Yeah.
But through that, he'd obviously had this back and forth, and he'd built a relationship with Ferran, he'd built a relationship with Andoni, and I think it was interesting. I honestly believe he was right place, right time. Yeah. He was the guy who was kind of like the arbiter of sort of this new world of if John George was the conduit between, Southeast Asian flavors, Ken was the guy who was like, knew the different. He's got a killer palate.
Yeah,
all about the different hamons.
Yes,
he knows the wines.
But he didn't overdo it.
No,
he didn't buy into it. He did what everybody did after El Bulli closed. They took all the techniques, and they were still making delicious food, but they were just adding textures to it without showcasing you're adding textures to things.
Yeah,
and I think that's what he does really, really well.
He makes really, and honestly, the secret behind Ken Oringer is he has one of the best palates on the planet.
Yeah,
he's the kind of guy who can like tell if you've like skimped out of 10 grams of caraway on a dish that's going to yield 2 kilos, and he was a great boss. He was very serious, and he was going through this phase where he was like having a lot of fun and trying to sort of enjoy his time and be very much involved in the restaurants. And at the same time, he was a very serious chef, and he was kind of the perfect foil for me because I was still trying to figure myself out. I was a little bit of a spaz. I was this young 21-year-old kid who like loved food, had all the books, read all the blogs, the ideas in food and stuff like that. And he was kind of like a little bit of the god in that world. Yeah. And he set me up to go to Spain, and I got over there, and I was like immediately like fish out of water. My skill set was okay and was good by like American restaurant standards, but these guys were just like, they were playing a whole different sport.
Yeah.
And
you didn't even know the rules of the game.
Oh, dude, you're looking around and like I was excited. I had some good knife work, and I could pass my sauces, and I could multitask, and I could use my palate and taste and season. these guys are measuring out flours by the gram so that the end dish has the perfect weight. You'd see stuff like that, you're just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But the food at that point at Mugaritz was pretty special because it was kind of like this era where it hadn't caught on.
What year is this?
This was 2009.
Okay.
So 2009, it hadn't really. It was obviously, it was a Michelin 2-star restaurant. As at that point, I think number 6 in the world on the World 50 list, and it gotten a lot of the media notoriety, but it was still like it was hard to get to, and it wasn't like. It wasn't
like, it's not in San Sebastian. It was like 30 minutes.
It was about 30 minutes up in the hills.
Yeah.
And you lived upstairs.
Yeah.
So you literally you were fully immersed.
Yeah. What did you guys do on your days off? Did you go down to San Sebastian?
Yeah, we would go like topless, bouncing around. And we would go and play soccer.
So you'd go into the city, or there was. Yeah. What city is Mugaritz in?
It's in the hills above San Sebastian, but we would go into San Sebastian, sort of like our little sort of playground, and all the other restaurants like Martin Bersategui.
Yeah, I was at Bersategui for like a month, and then I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
But on our days off, it was like somebody had a car, or we'd have to go. We lived underneath the restaurant, and sometimes we didn't leave, and we're just like stuck in Lasarte.
Oh yeah, believe me,
fucking stuck. Like,
what do you guys want to do? Go eat some cod or something? Like that?
I don't even remember there was like a place that had real shitty burgers that would go to all the time.
Oh yeah, Va Bene or something.
Yeah,
like that.
and I was like, this lifestyle sucks. I can't stay here.
Yeah. So we had one car. The restaurant had one Ford Fiesta, and there were like 20 of us who were like using it in different.
Yeah.
I obviously didn't have a license. I wasn't driving there, but we had we would drive up into Espelette in the hills. We drove to St. John de Luz a bunch of times, and that was like always fun. Like there were like Biarritz, and get like 8. Sometimes as many as like 6, 7 kids, like tiny little.
No way, man!
In a Ford Fiesta, I have photos of it. It is not pretty.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but that's how you get out. And otherwise you're just sit there. We didn't have
stuck
the iPod Touch. I remember I had an iPod Touch, which was like, bringing kryptonite there. Nobody knew what to do with it.
Yeah.
But I was there, and the unique thing that was crazy about my experience was. They were in the process of writing a book, and then the CIA came. The Culinary Institute did one of their first trips of students over to Europe, and they came to the restaurant in February of 2010. And this was one of the first times I've seen a ton of Americans as well. And
all of a sudden, you became the ambassador of San Sebastian, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. They came during one of the big festivals. Like we went out. I just remember that was like crazy, over the top. And 3 days later, it burned down. It burned down while I was asleep upstairs.
Wow, man.
And that sort of set on...
How'd that fire start?
The electrical fire.
Yeah.
And we got so lucky. The way the restaurant...
Sounds like an inside job.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Some guy didn't want to work the grill. The way the restaurant was situated, there was a massive tanker of propane that fueled all of the equipment.
Yeah.
There's no pipelines and stuff like that. You're up in the hills. And the fire... started in one part of the restaurant, and it got to literally about 10 feet from that thing. The amount of dumb luck that we all, the amount of 9 lives we used up that night is just unbelievable, unfathomable. And the first people to come in to alert us were not firefighters. They were Basque National Guard, straight up Secret Service, because they thought that
there was some ETA.
There was some kind of ETA involvement or some kind of terrorist activity.
Wow.
As a as a standard show. So that was extra freaky. And what ended up happening was, Andoni and the team, they basically made us all kind of pathways out into other stages or whatnot. But I made the decision to come back home, back to the US. And I, at that point, had a couple contacts here I'd been in touch with. I was talking with Jeremy Fox, who was at Ubuntu. I was thinking about coming out here or going to Manresa, where he had been the chef de cuisine for a while.
But you wanted to go to California.
I thought about coming to California.
Yeah. And
I didn't realize this, but he was going through some stuff, and he kind of, he's like, dude, I have some stuff going on. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. If I were you, I would come back to a better marketplace like New York City for a little while. And you've already seen a lot of cool stuff. You're in a restaurant that has this visibility. You should leverage that and use it as an opportunity. Continue your kind of learning curve. And I sent an email to Per Se. they'd got me a contact and I sent an email to Per Se. And as crazy as it sounds, the night that I sent that email was the night that Greg Backstrom had given notice. And Greg Backstrom was this tall, talented cook, lanky, funny dude from Chicago who had joined Per Se after a stage at Mugaritz.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they get this goofy email from a kid who is with this like crazy story. He was leaving Mugaritz and like, yeah, come and trail. Can you be here in like a week and a half or something like that? So I got back to the city. I trailed. It was my first interview. Like it was my first that was like a really serious restaurant versus having worked at Toro in Boston, something like that. But I'd always had a huge affinity for Chef Keller and those restaurants. And I got really lucky on the timing there. And I ended up...
Yeah, timing's everything with that group back then.
Yeah. And that was... I didn't realize it, but that was such a rich period. That restaurant was like 3 on the list on the world's 50 best. Chef Benno had just left to go open his new projects. The firepower of like talent around that space. Every single person who was on that schedule is like an apex predator or whatever they do.
Yeah.
Like Daniel Calvert was the fish cook. Mm-hmm. Corey Chow, who went on to be the chef there, was another guy. Chef Breeden, Johnny, my buddy, who had just started. He'd started like 3 weeks before I'd gotten there. Everyone in that org was primed and poised to go on and do crazy stuff. And honestly, the combined efforts of all the food that everybody was participating in and contributing there was just unbelievable. Like no one individually could go and do that restaurant there on their own.
Yeah, I agree.
It was the kind of the golden era of all these people contributing. Matt Orlando, and I was there for a year, and after a year, they offered me a position that was basically a little bit of an administrative shift, as well as sort of a documentation / sort of archivist, and also someone who was like facilitating some org changes and some updates to sort of kind of their current, their operations. And the title was culinary liaison, but it was basically you work directly with Chef Keller, and he wanted to change some stuff. Yeah, and you were basically the mouthpiece and the facilitator. And after I did that for a year, and learned just every day was a craziest learning curve. I mean, you're exposed to just the wildest stuff, and you're pulling off things at scale that are insane. I mean, Scottish langoustines that show up at 2:00 in the morning, and you're tracking it coming from the airport on a courier to get it into the Time Warner building, which has got security up to wazoo. Yeah. And then ultimately seeing that through the whole process of, that business and that restaurant and that culture. I left and I went and helped a buddy open a restaurant in Brooklyn with Johnny as well. It was called Governor in Dumbo. And again, as fate would have it, that restaurant had a pretty short-lived existence because it was closed by Hurricane Sandy. And that kind of put us into a little bit of, I was in a holding pattern for a little while we were trying to figure out if that business was going to come back. And then I ended up working for Michael White for a few years. And I don't know, got the bug and ended up out here stuck on a vacation once. I think I came out and visited my buddies who were living in San Francisco. And they'd all kind of treated this as sort of, they were kind of, snowbirds and had figured out, bi-coastal jobs, or they were out here for part of the year.
You just went on vacation.
I got stuck out here during the polar vortex.
In California.
In San Francisco.
We're in Nashville.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, out here. Yeah.
I remember when the polar vortex, that was 2012.
Yeah.
2013-ish. Yeah.
12, 13.
Yeah.
And I got stuck.
I remember because I was living in New York, and it with the polar vortex was definitely hitting Chicago, and I'm like, I'm so fucking happy I'm not in Chicago right now. God. Yeah.
It was, and I'm from the East Coast. Usually can stomach and hail.
No, that's different weather, man.
It's fucking terrible.
Yeah. I think that was the moment I was like, I never want to go back to Chicago. I never want to be in a place where there's a polar vortex. I want to be where there's like a tropical margarita.
Seriously.
Tropical margarita vortex.
Yeah,
I can handle this.
Yeah. Is there a counterpoint to this?
Yeah, raw oyster vortex or something, like that. I'll stay here for a little bit.
Shellfish. I'm thinking the acidity.
Yeah, flip-flop, plastic cup kind of hanging out. Anyway, so how long were you stranded there for then?
I ended up stranded for I think an extra 4 or 5 days in San Francisco.
Because their flights were canceled, everything. I remember, man. Yeah.
It was like it was perfect timing for me because I needed something to kind of like be a sign of like, look, you need an inflection point and sort of change direction a little bit. And
how you had been 2 years at Per Se already, or a year? Or?
I had been I'd been at Per Se, and then we had the governor thing, and then I've been with Michael White for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was in these positions where I was like rising through the ranks in each of them, but for myself and my own personal satisfaction, I needed something to refresh my enthusiasm and kind of reset me, and kind of shedding everything and moving out here was a pretty instantaneous.
To California.
Yeah.
We're in Nashville.
Well, again, out here. Pretend. Out here.
Yeah, okay, yeah. All right.
But moving out to San Francisco, that exact experience was like kind of like force you to.
And where did you wind up when you were in San Francisco?
I had one false start. I spent a little bit of time, and it just wasn't a fit for me, at a little restaurant called Outerlands, which was it's kind of like storage place out by the beach where I used to live, which was, fun. But my real, kind of métier time, I ended up getting introduced to Michael Tusk. Mm-hmm. So I ended up at Quince in Katonia.
Yeah.
And I spent a couple of years with Mike, and learned a ton from him. Yeah. Mike he's like kind of a god of the West Coast.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
He's this interesting guy who is a craftsman.
What's his background? Where do you work at?
Mike, he is originally from New Jersey. He spent a bunch of time in the Bay Area. He worked for like Jeremiah Tower.
Yeah.
He was at Shape and East back
Shape
in the day.
and East, that's right. Yeah, I remember, yeah.
But he's also like, he's an institution. Like Quince has been around for 20 years, and 2 locations, and he's kind of been baked into sort of this interesting fabric of, obviously there's money and economics, but also like a very creative world that he's sort of been kind of like one of the main, kind of proponents of.
Yeah.
And at that point, Mike was like kind of like looking to expand his restaurants. And after a couple of years, and there were some false starts within sort of the opportunities to do some other things with him, he came to me and he goes, look, I don't know what our timeline is with, doing some other projects, but you're kind of at this perfect stage of your life where, you should think about doing your own thing. You should think about.
So he fired you.
No,
so he got fired.
He came to me and said, like, look, I'd like to introduce you to a couple of my investors and friends. And I think that can be a segue for you to kind of, conceptualize what you want to do and commit to it. And these people will help you build. What a gift, huh? He gave me the key. He gave me the introductions that ultimately helped me build my little businesses.
Yeah.
And he's continued to remain like a really great friend and a good advisor. But he was also this guy who, like, he'd gone through many sort of reiterations and developments of himself. And he was constantly developing and evolving his restaurants. And it was a golden era there as well. Like they had gone from 1 to 2, and then while we were there, right as I was leaving, they got their 3rd Michelin star. And Mike was becoming this freight train of success. And the Bay Area is, for as big as it is, and for as many people and money and all these other things that are there, it's a very small restaurant community. And everybody kind of has to pass through that kitchen as sort of a little bit of rite of passage, but also like, Mike really holds people to the true kind of, authenticity of like working with the local farms. Yeah. The sensibilities that like, don't necessarily kind of, come naturally to when you want to open or when you want to work in a restaurant. Right. I'd say. Yeah. Yeah. And, and then I opened my places about 6 years ago, or I opened Camper.
Camper. Yeah.
And that's been an adventure, man. 6 years of owning a business like that is nuts.
So you opened in
2018.
2018, yeah.
We actually opened Labor Day 2018. So I always, every year right around this time, you get that reminder of like, hey, your rent's bumping and all these other things.
Right. Yeah, we opened it like the day after 4th of July.
Did you?
So it's like definitely like something we can fucking remember.
You get a holiday.
Yeah. Like, fuck it, we're opening.
I just remember it was like it was a sprint to get open right at that weekend, because that was sort of the like apex of everybody being back occupancy wise. And it's been a great experience. Like I said, where we are is at the heart of Silicon Valley. So we're in this like somewhat sleepy downtown little strip It literally feels like small town America. We have a couple stoplights, a couple stop signs, and a drugstore, and whatever. And there's a couple restaurants as well, but
the amount of wealth that lives within that 10-block radius
is crazy around us. Yeah. And then any given day, like our little sleepy community can get overrun with, dignitaries, people from all over the world.
Yeah.
People doing things at scale and in manners that like just boggle your mind.
So let's push play on.
Yeah.
What were we talking about, Preston? You said people come to the restaurant and they're thinking 5 to 10 years ahead.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that thought or not.
Yeah. So a lot of the people who we kind of do business with daily are venture capitalists and people who are looking at and people with titans of technology who are literally seeing, the long lens future of all the things that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that we've had the most success with, and I think that has become the cornerstone of our brand, is that, we do things in a very simple, approachable, digestible, and binary manner. And that is to say, like, hospitality is warm. We really like put a big emphasis on just trying to like make it not feel like we are in some kind of, doom loop of technology.
Some simulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is where, honestly, like we have the most success. And people come in and they really people enjoy trying things that are either, we have bolognese on our menu. We sell a ton of it.
Yeah.
Like it blows me away the things that the really simple, pleasurable things that people enjoy. And occasionally we introduce, some technique or, plating style or something like that. But for the most part, it's very straightforward and approachable fare.
Uh-huh.
And it's been fun because we've gotten to kind of like, we live in sort of a little bit of a bubble, but I know that the style of what we do is really based on, serving these people who are spreading out over the entire corner of the globe. And the number of times where we cook for somebody and they're just back from some crazy meal, Copenhagen, Tokyo, or Hong Kong business.
Do you think it's what they do for a living, planning out technology and working with startups and working on technology that you and I won't understand until 20 years from now that they're working on that now? Do you think like coming to a place like yours and experiencing genuine hospitality is something like it's such a juxtaposition for them to be this uber focused, futuristic, this is going to change the world, to just going and eating a very simple bolognese and you coming out to the table saying hello? You think like it's like their downtime, like they're kind of like, oh, I'm here. Like, oh, thank God. I don't have to think about, I don't have to think about Google Glasses, or I don't have to think about how we're impacting the world. And it's just kind of like almost like their decompression.
I think the interesting thing about a lot of the people that we're surrounded around, and granted, they're all high achievers and have gotten to these places because a lot of it is luck. A lot of it is also like making really intelligent, calculated decisions at scale that, are one in a lifetime decisions for most people. And a lot of these people do it on a day-to-day basis. It's just what they do. That's where they kind of operate within. But I think that they've also sort of anesthetized themselves or detached themselves kind of ephemerally from some of the real simple pieces of like being human. And the fun that I get, or at least one of the things that I derive some pleasure from, or at least some satisfaction from, maybe to say, is to like get to offer these people a little sense of like normalcy. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
It's funny for me
because they deal in a non-normal world, man.
I mean, like I think about like the kinds of all the things that we know for face value, they've seen the inner workings of in their best of which ways and their worst of which ways. Yeah. And I like that we provide something that's very tangible and humanistic. And I really believe that the future of the restaurant hospitality industry, even as we continue to evolve and scale different, fantasy elements or whatever, and things continue to sort of reshape along the lines of wherever the economics are going to allow us to operate within, keeping a humanistic element is going to be such
I agree.
a cornerstone of this.
I think when people say AI, I'm wrong about everything. So
No.
I think the restaurant industry is going to be unscathed, not the fast food industry, the things that we do, because you can't, I just don't see how you can replace what we do, a casual neighborhood restaurant, with AI. And I feel it's going to be rejected. Now, you might be able to replace a coffee shop with AI, where you go in there and you push a button and they give you the coffee, and it could still be very good coffee. And you can definitely replace the fast food industry. I mean, I've seen the videos of that Chick-fil-A truck that drives around. Have you seen that? No. That little like, transformer GoBot thing. It's just kind of like this little box that drives around and knows exactly where it's going and comes up and drives on your driveway, and you open the hatch and you pull your meal out. Like, that's already happening, or drones dropping things off. But like the neighborhood restaurant, the fine dining special occasion restaurant, I can't see a world where AI penetrates that human connection, that hospitality, that welcoming into your home, having a dinner, talking to the server. I don't see.
My optimistic outline and view of all this stuff is that, if anything, I believe that the exposure to those sort of kind of experiences will create, or at least reverberate and, substantiate the value of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, restaurants and hospitality spaces are a constant, the thing that makes these places restorative and interesting is that there is some kind of exchange.
Human interaction. Yeah. A bar where you go and see your favorite bartender and tell them about your day.
A bartender is not going to get replaced by a robot or a computer, because if anything, one of the big values of going to that space is it's a place to decompress and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And
it would have to be like, what is that HBO series where they're all where the robots are all on that, like Disneyland? What is that called? Westworld. It would have to be like a Westworld thing. By the time that happens, I don't think you and I are gonna be around here.
I don't think so. Yeah.
But it would have to be like so real that you wouldn't even know the difference.
I think the Cheers theme, sometimes when I go where everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
I think everybody, not everybody, but I think a lot of people, especially who, help support our industries, they want to go someplace where they feel like they feel a little human touch.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's in the form of imperfection. Sometimes that's in the form of like, there's a little bit of anxiety or there's other palpable energies in the room, but I think that that's hard to replace. And as we optimize everything else around it, I actually think it'll draw people more back to those spaces with an awareness of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of things. The rejection. See, the variable in all of this is if they could sell it to the public, and if the public rejects it, then there's going to be no AI. They're going to have to retool it to present it in a way that everyone's going to want it.
Yeah, package it.
Think of car phones, cell phones back in the fucking early 90s. They were huge.
Yeah.
My mom had a car phone for emergencies, and it was like $14 a second. Or, it's like you pick it up and, you're going to die. It's completely emergency. And how many years later, how long did it take them to develop what we have now? And it's the car phone and the cell phone back. It wasn't for everybody. It was like,
yeah,
wow, how rich are you? What is that? It was like the Zach Morris phone, and it could only do so much. And I feel like we're in that kind of incubation period right now with like, we have ChatGPT, but what is it? It's quick Google.
Yeah.
It can't do anything or tell you anything that's not on Google.
Yeah.
And it won't tell you. I don't know if this is what they gave us, so we probably can't ask it like, hey, what stock should I buy? Or, who created the earth? It just doesn't have those answers. But it can search through Google and all the web pages and spit out something. But I feel the incubation period of what we have right now is a little bit clunky and clumsy. You know, here's AI, you can make some cool artwork with it.
Yeah.
Or this is the conditioning that they're giving us right now. But like, hey, here's really fast Google. Hey, here's really cool artwork. You need a headshot? Let AI do it for you.
Yeah.
And it's almost the programming that's happening. And then they're going to program us a little bit more where the chat GPT can actually have a conversation with it.
Yeah.
And actually really can offer some sort of intellectual.
But here's the thing. Here's the question then for all of us, right? So that technology, let's say that is imminent. That's 6 to 18 months away from being in front of us. Mm-hmm. And given everything that we know about technology, not likely to bet against that reality, right?
I mean, they already have, I'm sure that they already have things that are like way beyond what we can comprehend.
So all that stuff is imminent. It's coming. In this particular instance, or with these things, I really believe, like, is that going to actually improve the value of people's lives? And I think we're getting to a phase now, even with social media and a bunch of different existing technologies, that we're looking around, and I think people are making more conscious decisions about, does this measurably, add value to what I do?
I think the rejection of social media is coming, man.
I
feel it.
I think it's a big circle, you know, or a reprioritization of it. And at that point, if enough people are kind of, retooling the way that utility participates in their life, does it mean from a wide scale adoption range that it's ripe for change? Probably so.
Right.
So I think that it's interesting with where we stand right now as a culture. We're at this interesting phase for our age. We're in our 40s.
How old are you?
I'm just about to turn 40.
Okay.
So we have a generation below us and a generation above us. Generation above us has almost no technology exposure. Very limited, because a lot of it really developed, kind of over the course of their lifestyles. We have a generation below us with a ton of technology exposure. And in between those, we act as sort of the arbiter of sort of, kind of how everybody interacts. And it would take another generation or two to really lopside or flip it back on its head. And I think
Gen Z is going to do that. Like, everybody writes Gen Z off, man. I think this is going to be the most unique generation. They get a fucking bad rap because they were dealt a shit fucking hand.
And their timing, yeah.
And their timing and everything, and they're lazy, and they're non-binary, and they're trans, and they're, whatever mud they keep fucking slinging at this generation. So they're going to stand up one day and be like, hey, fuck you guys. And they're going to fucking produce some of the most amazing art, some of the most amazing music, some of the most amazing intellectual beings that I think we've ever seen. And I'm telling you, man, this generation gets such a bad rap from the boomers.
Yeah. We're the boomers imminent, by the way.
Well, I'm Gen X. I'm in a sub generation. You're a millennial. I'm in a sub generation. So I'm below the boomers, but I'm above millennial, and I am 1 foot in technology, and I'm 1 foot in. We used to ride bikes until the streetlights came on.
Yeah.
I remember in high school, freshman year, taking a typing class, and then in senior year, being introduced to what the World Wide Web was.
Yeah.
And here is electronic mail. So I'm Gen X. I think Gen X is, not because I am, but I think it's a super unique generation because we grew up without all this shit.
Yeah.
And now we have it. And we have to be really savvy on how we use it. And also, a lot of Gen Xers are like, I'm fucking checked out, man. I'm not getting in this war between the boomers and the fucking millennials.
Yeah.
But the Gen Z, I think is going to really surprise us, man. I hope so. I really do.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones rejecting everything that's been put up. Like you and I, our parents said, you got to do? You got to graduate high school. You got to go to college.
Yeah.
After college, you got to get a good job that has good health insurance, and you got to get a car that has good gas mileage, and you stay at that job forever, and you go and you buy a house down the street from where you grew up, and you see your parents every weekend, and baseball games and backyard barbecues, and that's what we were sold.
Yeah.
So we were fucking sold, man. It took me 35 years to turn around and reject all that and be like, this is fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, Gen Z is saying we're not going to go to college and fucking saddle ourselves for the rest of our lives with debt. We're not going to buy into this economy that's setting us up for failure of this minimum wage stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to make YouTube videos and we're going to get on TikTok. We're going to become TikTok stars. And there's one element of that. And there's the other element. It's like we're out to see experiences. We want to experience the world. And we're going to take a pause on life. And we're going to go see Europe. We're going to go see South America. We're going to travel around. And then we're going to make our decisions.
Yeah.
And I know this, first of all, because I work with a lot of them. And my cousin Kelsey, who I adore, is basically everything that I said. She's bought into all of that. Like, fuck all this, man. I'm taking my time with my life. And I'm not going to follow these norms of insanity, of, you know, expecting a different result by doing the same thing over and over. Like, I'm not going to... This path that's been laid out is fucking bullshit. And we all, it's funny because we all know it is, but we still play this game.
Yeah.
We still play this game of, oh, you know, the minimum wage hasn't been increased. And, you know, my 401k is going to be there when I'm retired. Social Security is going to be there. It's all a lie. Yeah. It's all a lie.
I think it's good that every generation corrects a little bit of the,
it has,
you know, the inaccuracies of the previous. And I, in the same boat, I think I have a very optimistic opinion of the future. I think that we are all embedded with some structural challenges, but I also think that, you know, at some point the technology is going to lap us, right? And I think we're also going to get to a place where we're going to be like,
we're almost there.
Why are we racing something that there is no competitive advantage on our side from?
Yeah.
And I don't think we'll reject it. I just think we will curate it. We'll manage it. We will, you know,
reject it is not the word. Manage is the right word. When they give us the AI, we're going to manage it and balance it and be like, hey, you know what? This is good. I like this aspect, but necessarily need a robot in my house. Right?
Exactly.
You know, I
think everybody's got to figure out tuning all this stuff to themselves, and to ultimately, I think everybody's got to figure out like what their real need is of it, right? We were talking earlier about like how much we post on social media and stuff like that, and it's funny now. I've got my parents or my mom like post a lot. I post very little, and I also think that it's like it's not something that is a function of necessity for me. I don't need to be, you know, live streaming my life basically, right?
I want to be left alone, and maybe that's just me becoming old.
You like to think though. I like a little quiet.
You know, it's so funny. Like I used to like in my 20s, the chefs I used to work for, they used to be like, yeah, you know, I'm going to get like a cabin in the middle of nowhere and I'm just going to like hunt and I'm just going to like read books. I'd be like, that sounds so fucking boring. It's like, now I'm starting to understand it.
Oh yeah.
Now it's like, hey man, I'm starting to, I'm sorry I've made fun of you all the time because that sounds amazing.
There's a guy,
ice fish.
I got an anecdote for that. There's a guy who I met while I was working on my internship up in the Adirondacks. He was a former Trotter sous chef. And
what was his name?
Matt Sesich. Nice guy. Very kind of brooding personality wise, very like introverted, but very technically talented. He worked at another restaurant up in the Adirondacks in Lake George, and his story is wild. He ended up becoming Mennonite Amish.
Really?
Yeah, and he was this guy who was.
Can you become Amish?
Somehow he figured out he's got like a charcuterie stand somewhere up in like rural either Pennsylvania or upstate New York. And he's totally like, you know, kind of, you know.
Sounds like he's laundering money.
Every couple of years, I Google this guy's story because it's been documented a little bit and people have like kind of checked in on him from time to time. Yeah. And every time I hear like, you know, two Cybertrucks totaled on, you know, bumped into each other on like 101, I'm like, this is my time to like kind of like get a little kind of, you know, contextual sort of, you know, anti-technology story. And yeah, there's something to be said for that, man. I think this generation is also starting to like realize that it's nice being places where it's a little quieter and we're a little detached.
Yeah. You don't have internet.
Yeah.
Like,
God, I'm on a road trip.
Uh-huh.
You know, the van life thing is one thing and people kind of beat that as sort of like
extreme,
a little like, you know, but like there's a piece of like, I think honestly people want to get away and like are a little overstimulated.
I mean, humans are just always searching for some sort of connection. That's why when you go to a party and you don't know anybody, you start to look for people that look familiar.
Yeah.
Like, hey, that guy looks like so-and-so. It's because you want some sort of connection and familiarity.
Yeah.
And some sort of, not acceptance, but you're looking for that connection, you know.
Totally.
My friend, you remind me of my friend because I'm in an unknown situation right now and I'm looking for familiarity. I'm looking for a friendly face and you seem to look like him, you know. So,
well,
right on.
Well, this is awesome, man.
This is great, man. If we want to find you, where do we find you at?
You can find me in Menlo Park, Camper Restaurant.
Yes.
Or at Canteen is our little Spanish tapas bar. And anywhere in between the two. They're about 5-minute walk apart.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Right on.
Cheers.